At 11 p.m., a mysterious CEO left her Bentley at a small repair shop and vanished without explanation. Hours later, the mechanic discovered someone had sabotaged her brakes. Hidden inside the car was evidence of a conspiracy powerful enough to destroy a billion-dollar empire. It was 11 p.m. on a cold Friday night when a black Bentley Continental GT rolled silently into a small repair shop on the outskirts of Denver, Colorado. The woman who stepped out looked calm, but her eyes told a different story. Dressed in a navy blazer and carrying herself like someone used to giving orders, she placed the key on the counter and spoke only 4 words. "Fix it, I'll return." Before Mason Cole could ask a question, she climbed into another vehicle and disappeared into the darkness. Mason stood alone beneath the fluorescent lights of Cole's auto repair. At 38 years old, he had spent most of his life understanding machines. For 15 years, he had learned to recognize the difference between a mechanical failure and deliberate sabotage. As he walked around the Bentley, something immediately caught his attention. A thin trail of fresh brake fluid glistened beneath the rear axle. Most mechanics would have ignored it until morning. Mason didn't. He raised the vehicle onto the lift and began a careful inspection. Hours passed as he examined every system. The engine was flawless. The transmission was perfect. The electrical system showed no faults. Then he found it. A tiny groove scored into the rear brake line. Not cut, scored. Someone had weakened the line with surgical precision. It would survive city driving, but fail completely at highway speed. Mason stared at the damage. This wasn't an accident. Someone wanted the driver dead. As he continued inspecting the Bentley, he discovered something even stranger. Hidden behind a panel in the trunk was a sealed envelope and a USB drive. Written on the envelope were 4 chilling words. "If I don't return." Beneath them was a name. Logan Burke. Mason froze. He hadn't heard that name in 4 years. The next morning, Logan Burke arrived at the shop. Once a respected homicide detective, Logan now worked private investigations. Mason showed him the brake line photographs. Logan studied them silently. "This was attempted murder," he finally said. Mason nodded. Then he handed him the envelope. Neither man opened it. They waited. That afternoon, the Bentley's owner returned. Her name was Giselle Hartman, CEO of Hartman Automotive Group, a company worth over $2 billion. When Mason showed her photographs of the sabotaged brake line, she remained surprisingly calm. Not because she wasn't afraid, because she had already suspected it. Without a word, she picked up the envelope and opened it. Inside were documents exposing a massive corporate conspiracy. Millions of dollars had been secretly transferred through shell companies. Executive signatures had been forged. Board members had been manipulated, and at the center of everything stood one man, Adrian Voss, the company's chief financial officer. For months, Voss had been quietly building a plan to seize control of Hartman Automotive Group. If Giselle were removed from power, the company's stock would collapse. Hidden investors could buy controlling shares, and Adrian Voss would walk away richer than anyone imagined. The sabotage of the Bentley was simply the final step. If Giselle died in a tragic accident, nobody would question it. At least that had been the plan. Now the plan was falling apart. For the next 24 hours, Mason, Logan, and Giselle worked together inside the repair shop. Mason documented every piece of physical evidence, every photograph, every measurement, every mechanical detail. Years earlier, before opening his repair shop, Mason had worked as a forensic engineer investigating transportation accidents. He knew exactly how to build a case that could survive federal scrutiny. Meanwhile, Giselle reconstructed the financial trail. Using company records, emails, meeting schedules, and archived communications, she slowly connected the pieces. Each discovery revealed deeper corruption. Millions of dollars had vanished. Contracts had been manipulated. Entire departments had been used as tools in a scheme nobody fully understood. By sunrise, the evidence was overwhelming. Then things became dangerous. Charlotte Reed, Giselle's trusted assistant, discovered her phone had been transmitting their location through company software. Someone knew exactly where they were, and someone was coming. The following morning, Xavier Holt arrived at the repair shop, Hartman Automotive's general counsel. Two large men stood beside him. They claimed Giselle was needed for an urgent company matter. Nobody believed them. Mason stepped forward, calm, confident, unshaken. He explained that a complete forensic report had already been submitted to federal authorities. Copies existed in multiple locations. The evidence could no longer disappear. For the first time, Xavier looked nervous. Without another word, he turned and left. 2 days later, the company's board of directors gathered in an emergency meeting. Adrian Voss entered confidently. He believed victory was inevitable. Board members had already been influenced. The vote to remove Giselle was scheduled. Everything was prepared. Then Giselle began her presentation. She displayed evidence of the sabotaged Bentley. She showed photographs of the scored brake line. She revealed financial records exposing hidden transactions. She presented emails discussing what executives had called the leadership transition. One by one, board members realized they had been deceived. The room grew silent. Adrian attempted to defend himself, but before he could finish, the conference room door opened. An FBI agent entered carrying federal documents. Moments later, Xavier Holt was escorted from the building. The silence became absolute. For the first time, Adrian Voss understood the truth. He had lost. The vote proceeded. 7 board members voted to keep Giselle as CEO. Only 4 supported Adria. His plan collapsed instantly. Within days, federal charges were announced. Wire fraud, securities fraud, conspiracy, corporate corruption. The investigation expanded far beyond Denver. Investment groups, shell companies, and hidden financial networks became targets of federal scrutiny. Executives who once believed themselves untouchable suddenly found themselves answering difficult questions. For Giselle, the victory felt strange. She had saved her company, but she had nearly lost her life doing it. For Mason, things changed as well. His role in exposing the conspiracy attracted attention from investigators across the country. Old cases he had once worked on were reopened. Questions he thought would never be answered returned. 1 week later, the repaired Bentley rolled back into Cole's Auto. The afternoon sunlight reflected from its polished surface. Mason recognized the sound immediately. Giselle stepped out. This time there was no fear in her eyes, only gratitude. She placed 2 envelopes on the workbench. The first contained payment, far more than Mason expected. The second contained a consulting contract. Hartman Automotive wanted him to oversee independent safety investigations for the entire company. He looked at the offer carefully, then looked at Giselle. "Why me?" he asked. She smiled. "Because everyone else has someone they answer to." Mason considered the answer. For years he had avoided corporate politics, avoided investigations, avoided responsibility beyond his repair shop. But now everything was different. Giselle returned to her car and drove away. Mason watched until the Bentley disappeared down the road. The garage became quiet again. Tools hung neatly along the wall. The compressor hummed softly. Dust floated through golden afternoon light. Then his phone rang. It was Logan. "The FBI wants to reopen the investigation from 4 years ago," he said. Mason looked toward the old forensic certification hanging on the wall. A part of his life he thought was over. "Are you going?" Logan asked. For several seconds, Mason said nothing. Then he smiled. For the first time in years, the answer felt obvious. Yes. And somewhere beyond Denver, a much larger story was only beginning.